All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Saturday, August 3rd, 2024. This is your morning tropical update. We are looking at a much more active Atlantic basin getting into the peak of the season here. We have Tropical Depression 4. We were talking PTC 4 yesterday, but the storm has organized some near Cuba and has that low level circulation center established. So we have a Tropical Depression 4 on our hands, soon to be Tropical Storm Debbie as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. That will be the vast majority of the video today, but I did want to quickly mention that we do have other areas of interest developing in the Atlantic. We have 1 and 2 waves we are carefully tracking here. The wave just coming off Africa will be a while before we have to worry about it, but I do want to point out this wave about 800 miles off to the east of the Lesser Antilles this morning will be moving pretty quietly through the Caribbean Sea over the next week, and it will be somewhere in the Western Caribbean by the weekend, and it could find itself in a pretty good environment for development going into next week. So we're going to have more stuff to talk about. When we talked about the season having no breaks, this is kind of what we meant. As soon as we got to August 1st, we've got 1, 2, 3. We've just got, the wave trains lining up. So going to be pretty busy after Debbie, but Debbie will be the focus of our video today. So morning update from the National Hurricane Center at 5 a.m. Again, TD4, maximum sustained winds 30 miles an hour, moving to the west-northwest at 16. This will be Tropical Storm Debbie sooner than later, either at 11 a.m. or 5 p.m. Most likely. So we've had a few forecast adjustments from last night. We talked about them on the Facebook page, and they wound up kind of coming to fruition. Basically, a few things that happened since yesterday when we talked. Number one, the storm did wind up consolidating a center south of Cuba. We were showing you that broad circulation, and we were showing you that there was potential for a center on either side of that broad circulation. Well, the south side did win out, and that subsequently has pushed this forecast to the west a little bit more. The Hurricane Center's new track is a bit further west of than what it was earlier in the day, yesterday and last night. So that's had a couple of follow-on ramifications. Number one, that further west track means a potentially stronger storm. Thus, hurricane watches have been posted for parts of the northern Florida coastline on the west coast around the Big Bend region. So we are now looking much more likely that we will see a hurricane. The Hurricane Center's track still shows tropical storm through both these points, but they note in between there it could become a hurricane. And I think that's the betting odds favorite now, and I mean potentially, a Category 1 at least, if not potentially higher than that. Because this is going to buy itself more time over water, and it's already decently organized. The environment in the Gulf of Mexico between Cuba and Florida is very favorable for development. There's very low wind shear, very warm water. There's not anything really slowing this down besides time and land, as we've talked about. So with that further bump west, it's bought itself another 8 to 12, just maybe even like 15 hours over land, and we're looking at the potential for a stronger storm at landfall. The other thing this has done is it slowed the timing down. So now we're talking about a Monday morning landfall instead of a Sunday evening landfall. And that unfortunately has caused a severe butterfly effect down the road, because now the trough coming to pick this storm up, if I have it here, so the trough coming to pick the storm up, I can show it to you. This is late to the Sunday after, tonight actually, rather, Saturday afternoon. 0Z on Sunday. I just woke up from like a 13-hour nap, so bear with me here. We have your trough over the eastern coast of the Atlantic region, and then you have your hurricane, tropical storm, whatever down here. Following that weakness in the ridge that creates, but that trough begins to lift out pretty quick, and by Sunday evening is almost completely cut off. And although it leaves a kind of a light weakness for the storm to drift towards, as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, it's fully cut off. I mean, you've got a big high and a big high, and you've got this block in the atmosphere right here that's going to keep this from getting too much further north. And then instead it's got to wait for the next trough to drop down out of Canada, which probably won't be until the end of the week or the weekend. So unfortunately, that beforehand we thought this would have enough time to follow that trough out, but it had to hurry up and get going. And because now it's going to take so much longer to lazily curve around into Florida, it's going to miss its bus and then instead going to try to stall out. So those are kind of the big updates here today. Otherwise, everything's mostly on track. So a bit further north and westward in the landfall, a potentially stronger storm, and then that follow-on effect of the stall is definitely an issue. These are your current watches and warnings in effect. Again, that hurricane watch issued from the Osceola River to Yankeetown. We've had storm surge watches extend further north. They extended some tropical storm warnings further northward, and they dropped some down to the south, like the upper Florida Keys, no longer under a tropical storm warning. But most of the Florida West Coast and some of the southern Florida Keys still under tropical storm watches and or warnings this morning. You can pause the video, look at the rest if you want. Satellite presentation this morning of tropical depression 4. Again, that center of circulation looks like it's beginning to consolidate just south of Cuba this morning. It's probably going to be moving back over land as it crosses that western part of Cuba. But western Cuba is kind of flat and thin, so it's not going to disrupt it too much. And given how healthy this kind of looks, the circulation looks very healthy. A lot of good background vorticity, and the banding features are pretty good. I would say that this is going to be Tropical Storm Debbie sooner than later, and I don't like the look of how this looks. It's not great. So I wish this was a little bit more ragged looking, but there's definitely some indication that this will be able to take advantage of the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico sooner than later, and could be a pretty significant storm on approach to the Florida coast. Now, GFS kind of shows us this timeline. The storm moves off of Cuba later this afternoon. It moves into the Big Bend late Sunday into early Monday morning. This is 2 a.m. local time, Monday morning. And then crosses Florida slowly. Again, this is Monday afternoon. It only makes it from the Big Bend to just north of Jacksonville by the afternoon hours. That's like 10, 12 hours. And then 10, 12 hours later, it's barely gotten offshore. And then notice here on the GFS by Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, it's stalled. It just parks right here near the coast of South Carolina, Georgia, maybe even northern Florida, and it just hangs out. And the GFS here shows some potential significant strengthening of the storm. It shows that it could be stronger here than it was at its first landfall. And we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but I want to just point out that we have a significant potential for a stalling storm and a lot of rainfall somewhere along the coastline. We showed you the trough already. H-WRF coming in at 984. This is a regional computer model as far as the initial intensity at landfall. Matches up pretty well with what we're seeing, and shows you that potential there has been lowered from what it was, or upped from what it was yesterday, with lower pressures at landfall, showing a stronger storm. Hurricane tracks here on Tropical Tidbit, showing that kind of general consensus of the Big Bend to Florida type landfall. And intensity models are actually underdoing it a little bit today. I think these are going to have to come up in your next advisories, and ships leading the way there with Cat 1, but most models showing tropical storm intensity. Although I think that very possible that this first peak right here comes up, because this is the peak where it makes landfall in Florida, and then notice most of them recover it going into later in the week. So there's actually two different peaks there to talk about. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit of impacts here. The biggest thing is going to be rainfall with this one. Surge and wind is going to be a problem, especially near the coast, of course, but rainfall is going to be the big deal. The westward adjustment has brought rainfall totals down for a lot of the peninsula of Florida. I mean, Miami was never really in this anyway, but a lot of central Florida, Orlando, Ocala, some of the southeast counties, Space Coast and whatnot, have all had their rainfall totals come down to quite a bit. You'll still get rain from this. You'll have tropical moisture over you. You'll have enhanced afternoon thunderstorms. You'll have bands of tropical rainfall. It'll feel kind of like a hybrid of that event for you and green, but not showing you any massive rainfall totals. But that corridor of heavier rain has shifted to the Florida West Coast, where you guys are going to be getting pounded with heavy tropical rain bands all up the coastline. And look at the rainfall totals. 8 to 12 inches possible for Tampa Bay. I mean, it's definitely in the cards there for some folks. And again, to the east of Tallahassee, but to the west of the 301 corridor, it looks like where that heaviest rain might fall. Jacksonville, you're looking right around that 4 to 6 inch range right now. But I want to caution something with Jacksonville and Georgia and the Carolinas is this big blob of moisture you see here, this heavier rainfall blob, the 12 to 16 inches encroaching on Charleston and other coastal communities in South Carolina. This could shift to the east, it could shift to the west, it could shift to the north, it could shift to the south. All depends where the storm wants to stall, and that's very hard to predict. But I want to make the point to say that if you're looking at this map and say you live in Jacksonville and you're like, yellow looks like 4 to 6. There's some little bit darker color, maybe so it's like 6 inches. Okay, that's not bad. It does not take much to drag this back down to you, and then all of a sudden you're talking about 10 to 12 inches of rain. And I want people to understand, too, because I know some people are going to look at this and go, well, this track, boy, this reminds me of Adalia last year. It looks very similar, and it's probably going to make landfall very close to where Adalia did. But this is kind of a broad, sloppy system. Idalia was a very compact hurricane. I mean, it wasn't compact, it was a pretty normal hurricane, but it had a compact core. So the core of strongest winds and rain stayed away from Jacksonville. That may not be the case again. So don't look at the track and go, oh, well, Idalia was like a 3 and it didn't do much for us. Winds, maybe that'll work out, but rainfall, it may not be the same animal at all. And I want to show you this too. So this is the GFS on the relative humidity chart here. So you can see as it comes up, very heavy rain, tropical moisture spreads over Florida, makes landfall, heavy rain where it makes landfall, and then that rain starts spreading up the East Coast. A lot of dry air on the backside of this. This is dry high pressure controlling a lot of the eastern U.S. as centered over in Texas, right? So a lot of continental air being sourced there. This moves offshore, and a lot of that dry air initially tries to wrap around the storm and pull into it. So that will cut off moisture dramatically and will cut off rainfall dramatically for the folks that are not in the green here. However, as the storm stalls, that kind of moisture begins to return as now the storm starts winning. It starts pulling more moisture fluxes off the ocean, and especially if it's stalled offshore, you're going to start seeing more moisture wrapped around. You could have more rainfall Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And again, if you're in the coastal Carolinas, Beaufort or Savannah or somewhere in between, and you're just sitting here for days, I mean, literally days, and all this heavy tropical moisture. I mean, it doesn't look very long as I scroll through it, but this is most of the week. This is Monday afternoon through Friday morning, and it's still lingering in the area, and it's just causing more rain and downpours and whatnot. So don't discount that this could be a pretty long-lasting event rainfall-wise. So yeah, these are the rainfall totals for now. But notice how on the stamping on here on Pivotal Weather, you're already seeing a foot of rain possible for some of South Carolina, and then even 9 inches up towards Jacksonville, North Carolina, and then those rainfall totals could easily spread back into Northeast Florida and then push inland of Georgia. A lot of rain coming from this, and it's going to be a problem, and it could be strengthening offshore here. So you don't discount the fact that this region could also be seeing tropical storm and or potentially hurricane conditions while it's stalled out. There's a lot more to unpack here, but only so much I can get to in one video. So storm surge to come, 3 to 5 feet is the biggest peak around the Big Bend region, 2 to 4 still in the Tampa Bay. Don't discount the fact that the storm only being a tropical depressed storm or maybe a low-end hurricane can still produce a lot of storm surge. It's a big storm. And tornadoes will also be an issue throughout the week. Florida already being highlighted an enhanced tornado risk on Sunday, and then that likely continues into Monday near where those tropical rain bands are swirling around. So that's what I got for you guys this morning. We'll have more to come this afternoon and this evening, and we'll have more Facebook updates throughout the day. But we're a lot to track and a lot to unpack, folks, so stay with us, and we'll have it as we go along. Until then, as always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.